My name is Noel Latif, and I'm president of the Foreign Policy Association. And I'm really thrilled that we can be co-hosting with the SUNY Global Center this wonderful lecture series on global engagement. We're a great believer in joint ventures, and this is a wonderful joint venture in a world where we are facing a number of global challenges that are eluding global efforts to resolve them. And right at the top of that list is nuclear proliferation. So we are really thrilled to have as our speaker today José Rosemburg, who is the Senior Liaison Officer and head of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. I'm going to turn to Ilgu to formally introduce him, but I just wanted to share with you a thought that came from a speech that Senator Sam Nunn gave at the Foreign Policy Association. And in his words, I consider the goal of ultimately getting rid of nuclear weapons like climbing to the top of a very tall mountain. We can't see the top, but we can see we are now heading down. We must turn around and others must join us as we move together to higher ground. So I congratulate Jose for a wonderful career that he has devoted to this effort to getting us all to turn around. And I now turn the floor over to Professor Osler to formally introduce him. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. My name is Ilgu Osler, and I'm a professor of political science and international relations at SUNY New Paltz. And I am the founding director of the SUNY Global Engagement Program in New York City. I want to thank all of you for coming down to this event tonight. And this is a part of our SUNY Global Engagement Program programming. And this is our 7th year with this Foreign Policy Association running this event. And I must say that SUNY Global Engagement Program is where students come and live in New York City. They do an internship that is globally engaged, and then they also take a couple of classes with me on as a seminar and a research colloquium where they are actually exploring what they're experiencing on the ground from a more social scientific perspective. It is a comprehensive program. And for those of the students who are joining us from SUNY New Paltz upstate online, these are the kinds of events that you get to participate in New York City when you come and do the Global Engagement Program. Foreign Policy Association has been an amazing partner in this journey with us from the very beginning, giving internships to our students. And we are grateful for the joint efforts in the speaker series that we've been doing on global engagement as well, where we have had the goal of fostering international perspective and developing globally competent and engaged people. This is our core mission for both SUNY and for the Foreign Policy Association as well. And today it's more important than ever that we actually focus on multilateralism as a goal and encourage multilateralism as a goal. And there is no better place to do it right here as a part of the SUNY Global Engagement Program and FPA speaker series. Today happens to be also the 79th anniversary of the United Nations Charter going into effect. So it is no coincidence that we have one of our alumni. This is another thing. 3 years ago, we decided to have these events actually feature some of our alumni who have achieved great things. And I would say that José Rosemburg, who is here, was one of our is one of our alumni, and he was actually a student of Lou Brownstein, who is joining us today, who made the journey from New Paltz to join us today. And Lou Brownstein is a retired professor at SUNY New Paltz, and an emeritus professor at SUNY New Paltz, and he is the founder of our international relations program. He is the one that founded that, and then he hired me, and I founded the global engagement program. So Professor Brownstein has a legacy of being a tough one. You think I'm tough? Not even close. But as a result, you have alumni like José Rosemburg, who has gone on to accomplish great things. And I think that I can't think of a better person to speak to us today than José, who is actually right now the Senior Liaison Officer and the head of the Liaison Office at UN headquarters in New York for the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Organization. And he's been in this role since 2017. And in this role, he coordinates with the UN Secretariat, the permanent missions, NGOs, academia, and civil society on disarmament efforts. This is exactly what we're studying in class, right? How do these organizations intersect? His experience actually, gives us a great example of how this takes place at the UN environment. But previously, Mr. Rosemberg, I would say Dr. Rosemberg, was actually served as an ambassador in the Ecuadorian DiplomaticService. He earned the Career Diplomat title, and he held positions at the UN in New York, as well as Ecuador's embassies in Paris and Vienna. So he's been in multilateralism and diplomacy for many years. He holds a doctorate in international sciences from Universidad Central del Ecuador, a master's in public administration from Harvard, and has completed the Oxford Foreign Service program. Most importantly, he earned his bachelor's degree in political science at SUNY New Paltz. So, and we are so proud of that. I think José has been a great supporter of our students over the years, giving one-on-one mentorship to our students, continued support. And I can't wait to hear more about his 40 years of career experience that he's going to share with us today. I want to invite you up here, José. Please come on up.
Good evening. That was a very generous introduction. Thank you, Hugo. So this is the title of my talk this evening: a 40-year journey from SUNY New Paltz to the world of international affairs. Okay. So let me begin by expressing my gratitude to the SUNY Global Engagement Program and to the Foreign Policy Association for giving me the privilege to address this distinguished group of scholars, students, there's some diplomats, and friends. And words really can't describe the honor it is for me to be up here tonight. Thank you especially to Professor Ilgul Osler and to my friend Noel Latif of the Foreign Policy Association. Where is Noel? There he is. There we go. And you beat me to it. It's fitting that we have this event precisely on United Nations Day. We're going to talk a lot about the UN today. On a more personal level, I wish to thank my wife, Maria Cristina, for accompanying me at this event. She's been the guiding light during the better part of the journey that I'm going to try to describe this evening. And there's another special person in the audience that I wish to recognize. I think you know who he is already, but more on that later. So speaking of that special guest, when I was a student at New Paltz, he once gave me advice on how to write a paper Okay. And he said the following. He looked at me, he said, Jose, you tell him what you're going to tell him. You tell him, and then you tell him what you just told him. I haven't forgotten that. So let's see if this works for me tonight. Okay. So here's the plan. What I'm going to tell you. I'm going to do a brief overview of what I currently do at the United Nations, a general description of the international organization that I represent, its goals, its modus operandi, the importance for global peace, how I carry that message to the member states and to the UN Secretariat. Not related to nuclear testing, I will also speak and give an account of my previous UN experience at the UN with the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And my role, my small role, but in a very historic moment of its creation. So I'm going to share my story with you there. And then my experience as a member of the Diplomatic Service of Ecuador, where I attained the rank of Career Ambassador, how I got there, where I've been, what I've done, some pros and cons, and if I could go back in time, would I do it again? I'm going to, I devoted a special part of this lecture to something that I hope you will find interesting, how it all began at SUNY New Paltz for me. And then devoted to most of the members in this room, some tips for those of you interested in entering the world of global affairs, which I assume is most of you. I hope so. So, against that backdrop, let's begin. So, let me tell you. All right. So, what do I do? I currently represent at UN headquarters the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. It's a long name. It's even longer, but that's what I do. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about the organization, and I'm going to talk to you about the treaty. We have to go back in time. What is the CTBT and the CTBTO? So this is a treaty that's devoted to banning nuclear tests, okay? Nuclear tests. And it was negotiated at the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva, approved by the General Assembly, and opened for signature in September of 1996 in New York. The Office of Legal Affairs is the office at the UN that registers the signatures and ratifications of the treaty, and the Secretary General is the one responsible for this treaty. So this organization was created following these negotiations that took place at a special moment in, I believe, certainly in diplomatic history and in UN history. You have to put yourself back in the early 90s, mid 90s. I like to say this. It was a period of great optimism. It was a different place. The world was a different place. The UN was full of global conferences and of lots of cooperation, summits. Everybody was working together. Okay. And the CTBTO and other treaties and other organizations were a product of that. I'm going to speak about at least two of them tonight. So that was the mood. All right. It's changed. I'll mention that later. But what does this do? So the treaty, which has not entered into force, and I'll touch on that yet, monitors for global around the globe for nuclear testing. It uses 4 technologies: under the sea, under the earth. It smells radiation. It hears. So it's cutting edge technology. There's over $1 billion invested in this. The Secretariat is in Vienna. Okay, I'm the only one that doesn't work in Vienna, and that's where the executive secretary, the head of the organization, has his offices, and all my colleagues are there. Okay, so it tests for it tries to detect nuclear tests. And how does it do this? Let's see if this works for me. Okay, have a look at that map. Okay. Around the globe, there are over 300 monitoring stations using these 4 technologies, okay? Some of them may be in the countries that perhaps some of you come from, okay? There are several in the United States. And this technology looks out for nuclear tests, and it sends that information 24/7 in real time to CTBTO headquarters in Vienna, okay? It works extremely well. And it has been able to detect, for example, all of the nuclear tests that were conducted by the DPRK, by North Korea. I was just reading something that I wanted to mention today. Some of you may have heard recently that there's a country that it was suspected might have tested, right? You know who it is, okay? Iran. So there were rumors that they had tested a device. So we were able to, with our technology, determine that it wasn't a test, because they said that we haven't tested. It was an earthquake. It was an earthquake. Okay, it was an earthquake. So imagine that how useful that is. So it's working wonderfully. It really is. And I'll tell you the story. Between 1945, you remember, some of you have seen the film Oppenheimer, and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Between 1945 and 1996, there were over 2,000 nuclear tests. Over 2,000. Since then, there have only been 10, and there's only one country that in this century is still testing, but it hasn't done it since 2017, and that's North Korea. So the treaty is not enforced. I'll mention why in a minute, but that's a huge success. That's a huge success. No one is testing right now, and there's only one country, and hopefully they'll stop doing that. Okay. Now, the treaty has not entered into force. Okay, it hasn't. But I told you the good part first. Okay, it's working. All right. But why hasn't it entered into force? When it was negotiated in Geneva, and it was a different time in history, and they really thought it was, was going to enter into force, there were a group of 44 countries that are called the Annex II countries. Okay, they were countries that had some sort of nuclear technology, from a research station to weapons. Okay, and they all, by the treaty, were obliged to sign and ratify. Okay, and once the 44 Annex II countries did that, the treaty would enter into force. And it was thought that was going to happen. It hasn't happened. There are still 9 countries outside of it. There used to be 8. We're not going to get into that tonight. Okay. So who are they? In the Middle East, you have Egypt, Iran, and Israel. They have signed, but not ratified. Okay. You have China, the United States, and now Russia, that have signed and not ratified. Okay. And then you have 3 countries that have not even signed. So you have India and Pakistan and the DPRK. All right. Okay. I'm an optimist. I believe that at some point we're going to get there. Okay. But for now, the good story, the great story, I want to leave you with that. The great story is that 2,000 to just a handful. Okay. And that's good, because why do countries test these devices? Because to see if their weapons work. And every time they test, the next weapon is even worse. It's better. It's worse. It's worse. So it's good that they don't test. So that's what I do. I represent the organization here at UN headquarters. I devote my time to working with countries that are not part of this Annex 2. The Annex 2, I leave that to the senior leadership at Vienna. I don't touch them. But I work with these other countries that they either didn't sign, most of them small countries. They either didn't sign or they signed 25 years ago and they forgot about ratifying, okay? Small delegations that, the UN is a huge agenda, so they didn't get around to it. So my job has been, in tandem with a group of my colleagues in Vienna and under the leadership of Dr. Robert Floyd, the executive secretary, to get these countries on board. And in the last few years, 3 years, we have had 9 new ratifications. It's one of the most universal treaties, okay? Despite the fact that it hasn't entered into force, it's a success story. No one's testing, and we have many countries on board. I'll give you the numbers. 187 countries have signed. 178 have ratified. That's a lot. That's a lot. So it's a success story. It really is. So that's what I do. That's what I do currently. It's an important part of the UN agenda, and certainly the agenda of the CTBTO headquarters in Vienna, which I hope someday you'll have a chance to visit. That is what I do. Now, allow me to speak to you about a previous UN experience, okay? When I was posted to the mission of Ecuador in New York in 1992, about a decade after I left New Paltz, I had the privilege of being part of a negotiation that was historic, and I'll tell you about it. I was the note taker, but I'll tell you the story. Following the Vienna Conference on Human Rights, they tried to create, actually they tried to do it at Vienna, the post of United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, 1993. And there was a lot of resistance to that, in particular from non-aligned countries and countries that it wasn't their favorite issue. So there was resistance to that. So they couldn't do it at Vienna. They kicked it up to New York, to the General Assembly. And these issues are normally addressed, as you know, in the third committee of the General Assembly. So they didn't know what they were going to do. They wanted to get this done. The US led on this. They really wanted this. It was the Clinton administration. They really wanted this. And they were going to get it one way or another. They were going to get it. But they wanted to see if it could be approved without having to take it to a vote. It would have passed by a vote, but by a vote, okay? So my then boss, his name is Jose Ayala Lasso. He was the ambassador in New York. And he's still around in Quito, and I keep in touch with him. He was asked to chair a working group with an impossible task, a working group to negotiate this resolution. And nobody wanted to take it on. And he said, I'll do it. And he did it brilliantly. It's a very fascinating story. I actually wrote an article on this that no one read in Spanish in a journal in Ecuador. But the story is, I've since translated it to English, and I've been asked to include it in a book that's being prepared in Germany. Brill is the editor. I don't know if you've heard of them. So I understand it's a very good editorial, and it's going to tell the story of the beginnings of the Office of the High Commissioner with much more distinguished contributors than myself. But my story, I think, is very unique because I wrote this days after the events. If I had written it 4 months later, I would have forgotten half. So and I have translated and refined it. It's actually I think it's very good. So I'm proud of it because it's going to tell a story that isn't very well known. Okay, and it was part of UN history. You know, this resolution approved by consensus, which has given all of the succeeding high commissioners for human rights this moral authority. By the way, Ambassador Ayala Lasso did such a great job that no one expected him to. Nobody wanted to take this, and he did it. He gavelled through a consensus resolution. He did it so well that the members of the member states of the UN asked him. They said, "You have to take this role. We want you to be the High Commissioner," and he was. He didn't look for it, but he was appointed the first UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. So I had the privilege of being with him and being a witness to this part of UN and human rights history, as I said, as a note taker. But it was fascinating. He went to Geneva. That's where the headquarters of the High Commissioner is, as you know. And he took me with him, and I had the honor to be on his team during the time that he held that post. He actually left it to go back to Ecuador to be foreign minister. He had already been twice foreign minister. That's another story. But he also did a great job as foreign minister. But that was my experience, and I'm very, very proud of that. I am. Let me talk to you now about my diplomatic career. So, following New Paltz, I went home to Ecuador with a shiny new degree, Bachelor of Arts degree in political science with an emphasis in international relations. That's what it was called back then, okay? And I went home full of dreams, full of optimism, really excited about, doing something with this. And I went home. One of the first things I did is I enrolled in at the Central University in this doctoral program, which I completed. But what I really wanted to do was to become a diplomat. So as you know, those of you who are thinking of following a career in the Foreign Service, you have to sit for an exam, okay? So I had to do that, and it was not easy. But I wanted this, so that's what I did. I sat in my room in my parents' home, locked the door, read lots of books and magazines, and drank lots of coffee, and because I wanted this. And I went and sat for the exam. So as they say, many were called, few were chosen. Okay. Was I one of the chosen? No. I didn't get in. I didn't get in. But you know what? I really wanted this. I really wanted this. So I wasn't going to take no for an answer. So I kept studying, all right? And I'm very proud to say, I sat for that exam 3 times. I'm proud to say that, 3 times. This is what I wanted, and I finally got it. And when I entered the diplomatic service as a career officer, it was in the newly established Diplomatic Academy of Ecuador. I was a member of the first class. And I want to tell you that 2 distinguished graduates of that Diplomatic Academy are here this evening. They're at the back of the room. And they today represent Ecuador on the UN Security Council. And I'm very proud of them. They're my friends. Very proud of them. So that's what I did. And soon I started my career. I was posted first to New York, and I've done a few other missions around the world. I worked in Vienna, as you know, and that's how I started my career. But I also had an opportunity, because we spoke a lot tonight about multilateral. I had a very interesting bilateral experience. I spent 5 years at our embassy in France, which is different work. So it's political reporting, it's consular, it's trade, it's cultural, and it's just wonderful. Very different from multilateral, but it was a great experience. So I think I had a well-rounded. I've been very, very lucky. Would I do it again? Absolutely. It's not easy. For those of you who are thinking of this, it's not easy, because it takes you away from the people you love most, from your family, from your friends, from your country. It's very rewarding. It's personally very enriching. But bear in mind, there are challenges. It could take you anywhere and for long periods of time. So that's something. But for me, it's been worth it. It's been worth it. So now let me. I want to tell you a story. How did I get involved in this? How did I start in this? Okay. I'm going to tell you a story. My apologies to those who have already heard it, but I love this story. Okay. So there I was, a sophomore at SUNY the College at New Paltz, as it was called then. I think it's now the university, right? There I was. I was a sophomore. Okay. All of 19 years old. And I was lost in the wilderness. I didn't know where I was going. I was studying something that I was failing at. This was not going to be my life. It wasn't, and I didn't know what to do. So I had a friend. She was a resident advisor. So was I. I was an RA for most of my time at New Paltz, and I lived in almost all of the dorms. So she was a fellow resident advisor, and she said to me, she saw me suffering. She said, Jose, I study this. I study political science. I study international relations, and I have this professor. You may want to meet him. You may want to see him, hear him. Why don't you join me for a class and see if you like this? So I said, sure. Well, why not? Why not? Bear in mind, in Ecuador, there is no one in this line of work. I have no background in this. All right, but what did I have to lose? So I went, and I can see it like a film. I walked over. It was a crisp fall evening, a little cooler than it is tonight, and I walked over to the classroom. And I sat at the back of the room. Okay, and this man walked in he looked like 9 feet tall to me. Okay, thick black hair, thick red beard, and a deep stentorian voice. Okay, and he started to talk about international relations, world politics, and I refer to it as my road to Damascus moment. Okay, I was struck by light, like struck by lightning. I was mesmerized, and I said, as I walked out of the classroom, I said, "This is it. This is it. This is what I want to study." And that evening, my life was changed forever. So I said, "Okay, I'll take a course in the spring." But I was warned. People told me, you better be careful. He's a tough grader. He fails people. So it's just what I needed, right? But I took the course. And I loved it. It was international politics. I loved it. And the course ended at the end of spring, and I went to see my grade. Okay, and I thought I didn't do so bad, but I went to see what I got. And I actually went to the office of this professor. He gave me an A-. He gave 2 A's in that class. And several people dropped out. There was a lot of attrition. So I was stunned. And I'll never forget what you know the campus. I walked right after this experience. I walked down on that little slope that I think goes from Old Main down to Main Street. Okay, no, I didn't walk down. I floated down. I couldn't believe it, and my life was changed. And tonight, as you know, among us is Professor Louis Brownstein, and I want to pay homage to you, Lou, and thank you. I get emotional. Thank you for changing my life. It changed my life forever. So I wanted to share that story with you. And just to wrap up, on this segment, I also participated in UN semesters. I think, as I said, the second edition of the UN semester in Model UNs at Harvard and at the UN, and we did well. We had a good team, and we came back with prizes and everything. And Jonathan asked me to share. I told the story, so I'm going to share it with you as well. When we were preparing for these events, we would go to we had access to the UN library, the Dag Hammarskjöld library, which I hope you know. Now things have changed. Okay, now the libraries are on our phones now, right? But back then you had to go to the library and get documents that you couldn't get easily in other places. So I would look at resolutions and statements and read books and publications in preparation for that at the Dag Hammarskjöld library. Little did I know that a few decades later, my office, my beautiful office, where some of you have visited me, okay, that overlooks the UN, would be up the stairs. That's life. That's life. Yeah. Okay. So these were the experiences that shaped my career. Let me share something with you. Okay. That's the Palais des Nations in Geneva, where I worked with the High Commissioner for a few years. I want to share with you some tips on embarking on an international career. Most likely, some of these you already know, and they've been shared with you by your professors and your advisors. But if they help, here they are. So I think it's very important that you try to have real international experience and you travel. Traveling is easy now. When we were young, and I'm looking at my dear friend Judy, who was my colleague and very dear friend at New Paltz. When we were young, it was expensive to travel. Not many people traveled. Now it's so easy, and I'm sure many of you have done it. Travel, get that experience, all right, under your belt, and learn languages. And try to learn languages that are going to help you in your career. You could even combine the two. I'll give you an example. There are several countries that do this. I know Ecuador does this, where you can go and study Spanish at a Spanish academy in Ecuador and travel at the same time. So it's a great way to combine the two. But try to get that under your belt. Find mentors, okay? Of course, perhaps your best mentors are your teachers and your advisors. But you know what? This helped me a lot. I also found mentors amongst my peers. Okay, I spoke to you about one earlier that took me to the Brownstein lecture. I had a couple, 2 or 3 people at New Paltz, a bit older than me, like a year older than me, who I admired, and they were studying this, and they inspired me, and I wanted to be like them. So find mentors amongst your teachers and advisors, but also amongst yourselves. I think it's useful. and I have one of them who was with me at the UN semester. He was actually a visiting student. His name was Kent Reynolds. And he went on to UVA Law School, but I admired Kent so much. He motivated me so very much, and I like to remember him this evening. So do that. Here. Some of you are interested in getting into the UN and into the international organizations. Okay. Let me give you a tip. You know what you have to do? You have to get your foot in the door, okay? Sometimes people think that, to get into the UN, you have to start at the top or something. Get your foot in the door. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. I'm a very good friend of someone who used to head the mail unit at the UN, which is an important office at the United Nations, okay? So somebody who wants to go work at the UN says, mailroom. I'm a PhD candidate. Why should I go to the mailroom? Okay, why? Are you kidding? Let me tell you this. People who have, this friend used to bring in people to work with him, very talented at the mailroom, okay? Today, these people, and they have graduate degrees and they're really smart. They actually worked with me for a few weeks. I know them. They have gone on to work in offices that are part of the executive office of the Secretary General. Okay? Think of that today. And they're very talented young people like you. So those are the tricks. Get your foot in the door any way you can. Once you're in, people know you, you know your way around, and then you just, it really makes life easier. Networking, you know all about this, and it's so easy now with the technology, with LinkedIn and all that. So this you have everywhere you can tonight, everywhere. Network. Keep those files active. Set goals for yourself and try to accomplish them in your 20s. I always, when I speak to young people, I said, by the time you're 30, and you're not, I don't think any of you are 30 yet. You're not even near it. Try to get your goals out of the way. Try to get that done. Use your time wisely, okay? And you'll see it helps. The UN is a big creature, all right? Sometimes I want to work at the UN. Okay, it's a lot. Bear in mind, you have the Secretariat building in New York, of course, but that's not just across the street from the Secretariat building, you have the UNDP, you have UNICEF. Okay, in Geneva, you have refugees, you have human rights. It's in Paris, you have UNESCO. Each one of these offices has a platform for recruiting. Okay, it's not just you just send your documents in, and so you should be searching in the HR platforms of each one of these agencies. Someone was in my office the other day that I think I'm mentoring, trying to help. He's a lawyer, and I said, all of these offices have a legal division, all of them. You're a lawyer. So look for posts in all of these and keep looking and keep looking. Now, to begin a professional career at the UN, you need to have a master's degree, okay? So you have to have that under your belt from anywhere in the world, okay? But you need a master's degree. So look at these platforms frequently. You'll have an idea of what they're recruiting for and make your plans accordingly. Today, there's a big emphasis at the UN to work in the field. Okay, it's almost obligatory if you want to be promoted. So many of the offices at the UN have field presence. Okay, so and I would recommend if you get in or as a way of getting in is to get a position in the field. You're going to need to do it anyway, and I think it's best to get that done while you're still young, and it can be a wonderful experience. Yeah, so think about that. You say I say, oh, I want to work in New York or Geneva or Vienna. No, maybe you have to go to the field first, and from there You go wherever you want. And some people love the field and they only want to be in the field. So it depends. But think about that. That's one of the ways of getting into the UN. And I think this is my last one. You've probably heard this from your teachers. Don't think that international affairs is restricted to the UN and to the diplomatic services. There are now institutions, public, private, that have a need for people who have been trained like you, that know about the world, that speak languages, that have studied international relations, and you are an asset to them. So you think of that. Look for positions in the private sector or even in the public sector. Many of them have international offices. That's another goal you could be looking at. I love that quote. That's Dag Hammarskjöld. Dag Hammarskjöld, in my opinion, was probably the best Secretary General of the UN. Kofi Annan is up there with him, and I love that quote. The UN was not created to take mankind to heaven, but to save humanity from hell. It's so true. It's so true. And you've heard it in your courses. If the UN didn't exist, we'd have to invent it tomorrow, right? We'd have to. So to wrap up, let me briefly tell you what I have spoken to you about this evening. So my current activities at UN headquarters, the work at the CTBTO. I talked to you about my experience in my work as part of the process to establish the Office of the High Commissioner and working at the Office of the First High Commissioner for Human Rights. My experiences as a career diplomat in the Ecuadorian Foreign Service, my time at New Paltz, and some tips that could help you in your future careers. Let me close on this. I told you I took this course and I went to see Professor Brownstein. I was already in the course, and I said to him, I like this, and I'm thinking of maybe pursuing a career in this line of work. And he said something to me that I've never forgotten, and I want to share it with you tonight. He looked at me and he said, Jose, you're in the right place. You're in the right place. And so tonight, those of you who are at SUNY New Paltz under the great leadership, the program, I say to you, you are in the right place. You're in the right place. And I wish you much luck in your future careers. I would love to keep in touch. If we have time, you can visit me at my office. I'll still be here until December. We're going back to Ecuador at the end of the year with Maria Cristina. It's new to see what life has in store for us. But I wish you the very best. I've had a wonderful career. I'm so happy. I'm so grateful. And I've tried to describe this evening how I got here, and I hope it helps. I hope it inspires you. You are the most important part. This was my objective, to try to inspire and to tell you that it's a great career, and I hope you have much luck in it. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you are at this great program. You are at the right place. So thank you for listening to me this evening. I'm open for questions.
So we have time for questions, about 6 minutes. And so I'll prioritize our students, and then I'll move on to others. Are there any questions from the students?
Hello, my name is Ashton Nealis. I was just wondering, what are some examples of working in the field in your organization? Do you get to work with different organizations like the IAEA? Do you get to go travel to nuclear testing sites?
Okay. It's a good question. Working in the field, the CTBTO. Okay, this is the beauty of the CTBTO. So we have these over 300 monitoring stations around the globe, some of them in very remote places. But we don't have staff. It's very cost efficient. We don't have staff in the field. It would be so expensive. Most of my colleagues, my very smart, mostly scientific colleagues, are in Vienna, okay? But what happens is they travel to where these stations are, okay? They set them up. They give them to the countries that host these stations. We train the local staff, again, scientists usually, okay? We train them in situ there, or at regional meetings, or we bring them to Vienna, okay? So our field presence is not permanent. Our staff travel to these places. And we bring the tech people to Vienna, usually to train them. So that's our field presence, okay? But many other organizations, like the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, it was actually the first High Commissioner that started these operations in the field. UNHCR, I mean, there are so many now. There are so many now that have field presence. And as I said, let me highlight that. If you're looking to get into a career, look there first. Because there's a need for that, okay? And then you can go wherever you want. Okay?
Hi, thank you so much for speaking. That was very inspiring. I'm wondering if you could tell us one of your highlights in your time in the UN.
I've had several. But I guess it would be, look, I refer to it, the creation of the post of High Commissioner for Human Rights. Okay, it was wonderful because, as I said, I didn't do it. I was sitting next to the guy doing it. I was taking notes and I wrote something on it. But it was in the middle of a period of so much goodwill and countries, member states wanting to do things. Okay. And this was a need. There had been many efforts to create the post of High Commissioner for decades, and it hadn't happened. And there were delegations who didn't want it. They didn't want it. Okay, so I was there to see how how this agreement was woven. It took a lot of shuttle diplomacy inside the room. Okay. So it was great to see that, and I'll tell you a story. When no one thought it was going to happen by consensus, it was going to happen, but this was by consensus. And when the chair, the ambassador of Ecuador, gavelled in, there was the whole room stood up and applauded, the whole room, and then they made a long queue to congratulate the chair of the working group. And one of the delegates, he was the deputy permanent representative of Sri Lanka, one of the most brilliant delegates in New York at that time, who went on to become foreign minister. He looked at me and he said to me, "Jose, on this day, the flag of Ecuador waves very high." I've never forgotten that. So I hope that answers your question. I'm very proud of having been a tiny part of it. It was a great moment.
Jose, can I follow up on that actually to ask you about what do you think was the diplomatic characteristics of his leadership that was able to convince the stark differences and to come to a consensus? What are those qualities
Great question. Thank you. Okay, so let me begin by saying that when this started, there was a lot of suspicion and mistrust, and everyone was pulling, and there was a group of countries who said, this is not going to happen. And there was another group of countries who were saying, oh, yes, it is. We're going to get this through by a vote. And it would have received many votes, okay? But it wasn't going to be consensus. So I think the skill that the negotiator, the chair of the working group employed is he worked with different groups. Here's what he did. He identified a group of leaders in the room, okay, from all the regions, okay, but you know who's who. So he's on this thing, and I don't want to say secretly, but in a very discreet manner, he took them to the mission of Ecuador, okay? And no one knew about it, okay? No one knew about it. And I was there, taking notes, passing coffee, okay? And he negotiated amongst them, okay? And they all agreed, brilliant ambassador. India was there. I think Sri Lanka was there. Poland was there. There was a delegate from Africa. I just don't get his name, but they were all there. So it was a petit comité, all right, that no one knew about. So he got them to agree, okay? When they finished the discussion, the following day, they went back to the room, and a paper was circulated, the chair's text, okay, the chair's text. It was their text. And each one of them would raise their hand and support the text, okay? So if other countries saw that they were being supported by these leaders, it was easy to get agreement. That's one thing. The other thing, and I write about this in my article, he did it. This was going to be very difficult. And delegations from the very beginning said, no, we're not going to agree to this. So he knew that. So what did he do? He identified very easy things, okay? Where is the headquarters going to be? Geneva. Okay, Geneva. Okay. All right. What grade is the post going to have? Undersecretary General. Yeah. Just things that are there. So little by little, he constructed this resolution. And then he left the typical things to the end. But by then, most of the resolution was already drafted. And then it was just a matter of getting these countries on board. Now, at a certain moment in the negotiation, the US, headed at that time by Ambassador Madeleine Albright, tabled a resolution just before the deadline. She tabled the resolution because I told you they were going to get this. And there was uproar in the room because it was seen as a lack of trust in the chair. Okay. And he played that to his advantage. And so she called him. He said, look, Pepe, look, it's not personal, but we need to do this. And it was actually a great move because the countries that were opposing this knew that this was coming. So they had to do damage control. So they needed to get this resolution on the best terms that they could get. And that's what motivated them to work together. So that certainly helped in successfully getting this text approved. So that's what he did. It really, I mean, it's and then the final moments of the negotiations, there were times that it just seemed it was going to fall apart. And this man, he was much younger. He would in the room, in conference room too. He would shuttle from one end to the other, speaking to this, to that, to that. It was amazing. It was amazing. That's diplomacy. My friends from the delegation of Ecuador know that very well. That's how you get these things done. Okay, and again, put it in the context of a different UN, a different world. Okay, today, I don't know if this. No, I don't know if it could be done. I don't know, but that's how I saw it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We can continue this in our reception outside. And thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. And thank you for all of you for coming. And let's continue our conversations right outside with food and drinks. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you to all. Thank you so very much.